My girlfriend told me she needed a break to find herself, but not long after, she hooked up with some guy she worked with. Now, a full year later, her life's basically fallen apart and she's come crawling back, asking to move back in since no one else will help her out. For context, I'm a 30-year-old guy. Diana, my ex, is 28. We'd been together for 5 solid years, and for the last 3, we shared an apartment where I was the one officially on the lease. From where I stood, our relationship seemed stable. We had our routines down. We talked about the future like it was a shared roadmap, and even though we had the usual little disagreements here and there, I thought we had a pretty strong bond. Our lives were deeply connected, same friends, holiday gatherings with each other's families, and the kind of daily rhythm you get used to in a long-term relationship. I mention all this because it's key to understanding what came next and where my head's at now. Things started falling apart out of nowhere. One night, Diana sat me down and told me she was feeling lost. She said being in the relationship had blurred her sense of self and that she needed time to figure out who she was outside of us. She brought up the idea of taking a break. To say I was blindsided would be putting it mildly. I didn't see it coming at all. I asked her what exactly she meant by a break. Like, were we still exclusive? Was she planning to see other people? But her answers were vague. She said she hadn't figured that part out yet and mainly just needed some space, maybe stay with her sister or a friend for a bit. I tried suggesting therapy either for her alone or for both of us together, but she shot that down, saying this was something she needed to work through solo. Even though I didn't like it, I agreed. I made it clear I was uncomfortable with the whole thing and wanted some ground rules. We agreed she'd move a few of her things to her sister's place and we'd keep in touch with a weekly phone call. I also said flat out that, for me, this break didn't mean we were free to date other people. She nodded at that, but honestly, her response wasn't as convincing as I'd hoped. The first couple of weeks were rough. I tried to keep going with my routine, work, seeing friends, but the apartment felt way too quiet. Our weekly check-ins felt forced. Diana would talk in circles about thinking things through, writing in a journal, spending time with her sister, that sort of thing. I tried to honor her request for space. Then one day, a mutual friend of ours, Alex, reached out. He sounded uneasy but said he thought I needed to know something. He'd seen Diana out at a bar in a nearby town and she wasn't with her sister. She was with some guy I didn't recognize, and according to Alex, they were acting pretty cozy, definitely looked like a date. I thanked him for the heads up. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I tried to figure out what was going on without throwing accusations. I remembered Diana talking about some new project at work that was keeping her there late. So, during our next scheduled call, I casually asked about her week. She mentioned being swamped with work and said she had a quiet weekend with her sister. I specifically asked if she'd gone out to unwind or anything. She flat out denied it, saying she mostly stayed in. That didn't match what Mason told me, and suddenly my unease turned into full-blown suspicion. I didn't do anything drastic like follow her around, but I started paying closer attention. Then, out of the blue, another friend, not connected to Alex, mentioned spotting Diana's car parked regularly at an apartment complex in a different part of the city. As far as I knew, neither her sister nor any of her close friends lived there. Then there was the streaming account we used to share. I noticed new shows popping up in the recently watched section, stuff we never watched together. But I remembered a guy from Diana's office, Ben, mentioning he was into those exact shows. She had mentioned Albert before in passing, saying he liked that stuff. Little clues were starting to line up in an uncomfortable way. Eventually, I decided I needed to confront her directly. I asked her to meet me at the apartment under the pretense of discussing bills and a few loose ends, which was partly true, but really I just needed to get to the bottom of everything. When she showed up, I kept things calm. I asked her straight up if she was seeing someone else. She immediately denied it and acted offended that I'd even bring it up. She repeated that the break was about her trying to rediscover herself. That's when I laid out what I knew: Alex's story, the odd parking situation, and the streaming activity tied to Ben. I even mentioned that Ben's social media, which was public, lined up with the stuff showing up on the account. Her attitude changed real quick. That defensive tone disappeared and she started fumbling through a bunch of excuses. First, she claimed she only grabbed coffee with Albert a few times and said he was just being a supportive friend during a confusing time. She said Massa must be misunderstood what he saw. But the more I calmly pointed out the inconsistencies, the shakier her story got. Eventually, she broke down and admitted she'd been seeing Ben. And yeah, it had turned physical not long after the break started. She tried to spin it, saying she'd felt alone, didn't know what she was doing, and that Albert gave her attention she hadn't felt from me in a while. That hit hard. She never brought up any of this before asking for space. Suddenly it was all coming out now after the fact. She kept saying it wasn't planned and that she still had feelings for me. I let her talk. I sat there and listened without interrupting. After she finished talking, I took a deep breath and told her straight. What she'd done, especially all the lying and sneaking around, had shattered the trust between us. I said that no matter what she felt was missing from our relationship, she didn't have to go down the path of deception. She could have talked to me. Instead, she chose to lie over and over. And because of that, I couldn't see any way forward for us. This wasn't up for debate. I wasn't looking to talk it through or weigh the pros and cons. I was ending it, period. Diana didn't take it well. She broke down crying, going back and forth between apologizing and trying to shift the blame. She said things like, "If you'd just been more present," or, "Maybe if the relationship had been stronger, I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere for comfort." I didn't bite. I stayed calm and told her that she made her choices. Nobody forced her hand. It was the lies that did the real damage, and that's what I couldn't forgive. I asked her to make arrangements to come by and pick up whatever she still had at the apartment. Over the next few weeks, the air was thick with tension. She showed up when I wasn't home most of the time, grabbing her stuff quietly. There were a few times we crossed paths. Each time, she'd try to reopen the door, talk about maybe going to couples therapy, which she'd shot down when I'd originally suggested it. But I didn't budge. I told her therapy couldn't undo betrayal. It couldn't take away the fact that she'd gone behind my back while pretending to be on a journey of self-discovery. Eventually, she cleared out the last of her things. Her sister came to help. I had a short and polite conversation with her. She looked awkward, didn't say much, and honestly, I didn't blame her. The day after Diana was officially gone, I changed the locks. No drama, just a clean break. From there, I put all my energy into taking care of myself. I let my close friends and family know what had happened. Just the basics, no trash talking. I figured if I stuck to the facts, the truth would speak for itself. Some of Diana's friends, the ones who only knew her side of things, reached out at first. A couple of them were confused, even made it sound like I was being unnecessarily cold. I calmly explained what had gone down, and most of them came around pretty quickly. Meanwhile, Diana started calling me late at night, emotional, sometimes even accusatory. I let it go for a bit, then finally blocked her number. I unfriended and blocked her on all the social media accounts too. I knew I needed space, and that was the only way to get it. After that, life slowly started settling into a new rhythm. I threw myself into my hobbies, spent time with friends I hadn't seen much of toward the end of the relationship, and gave extra focus to my job. I didn't start dating again, I just wasn't in that headspace yet. Now and then, I'd hear little updates through the grapevine, mostly from Alex, who'd run into mutual acquaintances. From what I heard, Diana was living with Ben. Sounded like their relationship was still going, at least on the surface. I accepted it and kept moving forward. I was proud of how I'd handled everything, even if it hadn't been easy. I was slowly getting my footing back. Then, out of the blue, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I picked up and it was Diana. Her voice was shaky, like she was holding it together by a thread. It had been months since we'd last talked, and this wasn't the same confident person I'd dealt with before. She apologized again, but this time it sounded different. More like someone desperate than just remorseful. She started explaining what had been going on. Turns out Albert had broken things off with her. Pretty suddenly, too. She said he asked her to move out of his place, and she had. At the same time, her job situation had fallen apart. Diana had been on a contract job tied to a project, and that project had ended. They didn't renew her contract, said it was due to budget cuts or something. But Diana seemed to think Albert might have had something to do with it. He apparently had some pull in that circle. She'd been applying for jobs, but nothing was sticking. She had no savings left. For a while, she'd been crashing on a friend's couch, but that arrangement was coming to an end. She told me she'd asked her sister for help, but her sister had a newborn and not enough room to take her in. Her parents weren't an option either, health and money issues. And then she asked me. She asked if she could come home, meaning back to my apartment. She said it'd just be temporary, just long enough to land a job and get back on her feet. She swore she'd contribute, said she wouldn't be a burden. She brought up our 5 years together, all the memories, and said I was the only person she could think of who might still care enough to help. She admitted she'd made a mess of things and said life was punishing her for it. She needed a break, just some kind of lifeline. When I didn't immediately say yes, she asked if I could at least lend her some money to help her rent a room or cover her bills for a bit. She cried through most of that call. I didn't give her an answer right away. I told her I needed time to think about it. Since then, she's sent several long texts, more apologies, more details about how rough things have been. She keeps reaching out, hoping I'll show some compassion. A mutual friend, someone who's closer to her than to me, reached out too. They said they'd already helped her out as much as they could and asked if maybe I'd consider doing the same, even just a little, out of kindness. And I'll be honest, I feel torn. Not because I want her back. That's not happening. The trust is long gone and I've got no interest in trying again. But I did share a big chunk of my life with this person. 5 years. And the way she described her current situation, it sounds pretty bleak. Still, no matter how much sympathy I could muster, I kept coming back to one hard truth. Everything Diana was going through now stemmed from choices she made. It all started the moment she decided to cheat and cover it up with lies. That was the first domino. Right now, I'm leaning toward telling her something like, I hear that things are rough and I don't wish you harm, but I'm not the one who can help you with this. You'll need to find another way. That's the truth. I'm not responsible for what's happened to her, and letting her back into my life in any capacity, housing her, giving her significant help, would tear down the boundaries I've fought hard to build. Boundaries that are the only reason I've been able to find some calm after the chaos. There's also the risk that if I do too much, she might take it as a sign that the door's not totally closed. But it is. It has been. And I'm not about to let her back in through a side window. A few folks had questions or made assumptions I should probably clear up. First, Diana's reason for the break. When she brought it up, she was vague, said she felt lost and needed time to find herself. She never said she was unhappy with me or that the relationship wasn't working. It sounded like some personal journey she had to go on alone. Looking back, I can't help but feel like it was either a cover story or only part of the truth, especially considering how fast she got involved with Ben. Second, her apologies. During the breakup, when she was first caught, her apologies were always tangled up with excuses. Stuff like, I'm sorry, but you were emotionally distant, or I'm sorry, but Albert made me feel seen. She never once gave me a clean apology, no full ownership until things in her life fell apart. That timing said a lot to me. Third, the lies. She didn't just lie to me about the affair. She also told her sister and some of our mutual friends a totally different story about our break. She painted herself as someone who was trapped in a suffocating relationship and me as cold and unyielding. It caused some awkwardness for a while until people started to piece together the real timeline. At the end of the day, my priority is protecting my peace. I've worked too damn hard to rebuild after what she did. Letting her stay here, or even helping too much, would blur lines I've set up for a reason. It might give her hope for something I know will never happen again. So, after a few days of thinking things through and after letting all the feedback settle in, I knew what I had to do. Diana kept texting. Her messages were long, emotional, and more desperate each time. She talked about how every option was falling through, no friends left to lean on, distant relatives saying no, her savings gone. I decided to talk to her one last time. But I didn't want any misunderstandings, so I chose to make a phone call and record it just to be safe. I also kept it short and clear because I didn't want to get sucked into another drawn-out emotional tug-of-war. She picked up, and as soon as she heard my voice, she sounded hopeful. That made it harder, but I stuck to my decision. I told her I'd given everything she said a lot of thought. I acknowledged that what she was going through was tough. Genuinely, on a human level, I felt for her. Then I said the part that mattered most. I couldn't let her stay at my place, not for a day, not for a week, not under any circumstances. I said our relationship was over, the trust was gone, and letting her back into my home would hurt me in ways I'm just not willing to risk. I also made it clear I wasn't going to give her any large amount of money. I told her her situation was the outcome of decisions she had made, not just one bad night or one mistake, but a chain of choices. And while I could empathize, it wasn't mine to fix. I encouraged her to look into every other option, social services, shelters, food banks, maybe extended family she hadn't tried yet. I did say I would send a grocery store gift card, enough to cover a few days of food. That was the most I could offer, one small act of goodwill with no strings and no expectations. And I told her clearly this was it. Final. No further help was coming. She was quiet for a long moment after that. Then she started crying, not the kind of crying that felt manipulative or performative like before. This sounded like someone truly at the bottom. It was painful to hear, but I didn't take it back. She asked me, "So that's it? After 5 years, you're just tossing me aside when I've got no one left?" I told her gently but clearly that I wasn't throwing her away, I was protecting myself. I reminded her that it was her actions that ended what we had. She made the choices that led us here, and I had every right to keep my life on the path I'd worked hard to rebuild. I said those 5 years we spent together weren't nothing, but they were also the very thing she betrayed. That's when her tone shifted. The tears turned to anger. She called me cold, said I was heartless and unforgiving. She told me she thought I was a better man than this. She started bringing up specific moments from our past, times we'd leaned on each other, times I'd been there for her, trying to use them like leverage, like I owed her something now because of what we'd once shared. I didn't get into it. I didn't argue or defend myself or rehash old memories. I just repeated that my decision was final. She hung up on me. A few minutes later, the text messages started coming in, one after another. Angry rants, guilt trips, accusations. I skimmed the first few, then stopped reading. I didn't respond. As promised, I bought the e-gift card to the local grocery store and texted her the code and PIN. The message was short and simple as discussed. "I hope this helps you find a way forward." She never responded to acknowledge it. But a few days later, I checked the card's balance online. It had been used in full. I also reached out to the mutual acquaintance who had contacted me on her behalf earlier. I let them know what I decided and why, and politely asked that they not get involved again or try to act as a go-between. They were disappointed, I could tell. But to their credit, they said they understood and respected my decision. After that last call, I felt a mix of emotions. There was definitely sadness. How could there not be? 5 years is a long time to be with someone, and it's not easy watching things fall apart so completely. But stronger than the sadness was a deep sense of relief. I'd stood firm. I didn't let guilt or emotion pull me back into a situation that wasn't good for me. It was painful, yeah, but I knew I had made the right call. Time has passed. Life has moved on. And for the most part, things have settled. I never heard from Diana again directly. I stayed focused on my own life, my work, my friendships, my own mental health, and I kept the boundaries I'd set in place. I got occasional updates through people who were more in Diana's circle than mine. That mutual acquaintance who once tried to mediate? They eventually stopped bringing her up, just like I'd asked. But another old friend, someone who still had connections to Diana's side of things, would sometimes share little bits of information. Not because they wanted me to step in, just more as a passing update. From what I heard, things didn't get much better for her right away. She bounced between different people's couches for a while, never anywhere for long. She couldn't seem to land on her feet. I don't know if it was the job market, the stress, or just the weight of everything catching up to her, but she wasn't able to find stable work. Eventually, I heard she managed to rent a room in a shared house across town in a cheaper area. She also picked up part-time shifts in the service industry, nothing like the job she had before and definitely not enough to rebuild with, but at least it was something. For a while, that was the last I heard. I figured maybe, finally, she was starting to piece things back together. Then, just a few weeks ago, I got an email from her sister. I hadn't heard from her since the day she helped Diana move out of my place. Her message was short and straightforward. She let me know that Diana had lost the part-time job due to poor attendance. After that, she couldn't pay rent and got evicted from the shared house. She'd run through all her temporary housing options. She was, once again, homeless. Her sister said Diana's mental health had taken a sharp dive. She was severely depressed, refusing professional help, and wouldn't reach out to any real support networks or programs that could possibly assist her. She had stayed briefly with her sister's family again, but it hadn't worked out. Her emotional state was volatile, and it had put a lot of strain on the household, especially with a newborn in the mix. Eventually, they had to ask her to leave after what her sister described only as a difficult incident. Now, she was staying in a women's shelter in the city. Her sister wasn't asking me for anything. She made that clear. She said she just thought I should know because of the history I shared with Diana and because Diana had apparently been talking about me again. Saying things like, maybe if I apologize enough, he'll help me. The sister wanted me to understand she didn't support that idea, she was just trying to be honest. She was at the end of her rope too. I took a day to think about it, then wrote back. I told her I was truly sorry to hear what Diana and the whole family were going through. I said I could only imagine how heavy it must all feel. But I also made it clear that my position hadn't changed. I let her know that, while I felt sympathy for what Diana was facing, I wasn't in a place to step back into that dynamic. That I'd said my piece, done what little I could in the past, and had to keep moving forward with my own life. Trying to help now after all that's happened would only hurt us both. Diana's sister wrote back shortly after. She thanked me for my honesty and said she understood. That was the last I've heard from anyone connected to Diana. She hasn't tried to contact me directly, and I assume it's either because she no longer has the means to, or maybe, finally, she's accepted the answer I gave her all those months ago. Her life has clearly taken a hard turn since everything fell apart. It started with the end of our relationship, followed by her short-lived thing with Ben, and the downward spiral that came after. That crash I talked about in my original post? Yeah, it was real, and it's been long and rough for her. As for me, this past year has been one of slow, steady healing. I've held to my boundaries. I've kept my space protected. And my life, honestly, it's stable now. I've managed to put that whole painful chapter behind me. Not without effort, but it's behind me all the same. That said, I'd be lying if I said hearing about Diana's ongoing situation doesn't stir up some quiet sadness, maybe, for the version of her I once loved. Or who I thought she was. But that feeling doesn't shake my resolve. It doesn't change anything. From my side of things, this is where the story ends. The door is closed. Diana made choices, ones that brought her to where she is now. Her path has been harsh, and I don't take any pleasure in that. But I also know it's not mine to fix. I'm not responsible for the fallout. I've made peace with that. I didn't waver when she came to me for help, and I don't regret the way I handled it. Standing firm was something I had to do for my own well-being and peace of mind. And honestly, I'm proud of myself for doing it. I do hope sincerely that Diana finds her way back from where she's fallen. I hope she gets the help she needs and chooses to start rebuilding her life in a healthy, lasting way. But that journey? It's hers. And hers alone.